About 70% of Americans call themselves middle class. The actual number is closer to 50%, and it's dropping. So today I'm breaking down exactly why the middle class is quietly going extinct, starting with what middle class even means, because most people get it wrong. The definition. Here's the thing. Middle class isn't a vibe. It's not I own a house and go on vacation once a year. Economists define it as households earning between 2/3 and twice the national median income. That's the box. You're either in it or you're not, regardless of how you feel about your financial situation. In the early 1970s, about 61% of American adults lived in middle-income households. By the mid-2010s, that number had fallen to roughly 50%. An 11-point drop sounds modest on paper. It's not. That represents tens of millions of people shifting economic tiers within a single generation. And here's what nobody talks about. The decline isn't just people getting richer. Growth in lower-income households has been at least as large as growth in upper-income households. A massive chunk of the former middle class didn't climb up. They drifted down. The post-war middle class was built on specific conditions: strong unions, progressive taxation, affordable housing, and manufacturing jobs that paid well without requiring a degree. Remove those pillars, and the whole structure buckles. Which is exactly what happened, but countries with stronger welfare states haven't experienced nearly the same hollowing out, same global pressures, different policy choices, different outcomes. This isn't an inevitability, it's a decision. And the first domino that fell was the collapse of American manufacturing. The manufacturing collapse. Here's the thing about manufacturing jobs. They weren't just jobs, they were the entire promise. You show up, you work hard, you get a house, a pension, and your kids do better than you did. That was the deal. And then the deal evaporated. U.S. manufacturing employment peaked at around 19 million workers in 1979. By the late 2010s, that number had fallen to roughly 12 million. That's 7 million jobs gone. The UK saw an even steeper proportional collapse, dropping from over 30% of jobs in the early 1970s to below 10% by the 2010s. But here's where it gets dark. Real manufacturing output actually went up during this period. Factories were producing more stuff with fewer people, productivity skyrocketed, profits climbed, and the workers who made it all possible got shown the door. Which is, not ideal. The replacement jobs everyone promised, they never showed up, not in those communities, not at those wages. Meanwhile, private sector union density in the US collapsed from over 20% in the early 1980s to around 6% recently. Unions were the mechanism that forced productivity gains to flow outward to workers instead of upward to shareholders. Without them, the money just went up and stayed there. The generational damage is the worst part. If you're young in a de-industrialized town, you've got two options. Move to an expensive city and compete for credential-intensive work, or stay and accept low-wage service jobs with zero security. That's not a choice, that's a trap. But if you think losing the jobs was bad, wait until you see what replaced them, because the economy didn't just shrink in the middle, it hollowed out into something much uglier. The hourglass. Picture the economy as a shape. In the 1970s, it looked like a diamond, fat in the middle, thin at the top and bottom. Most people clustered around a livable median, earning enough to be comfortable without being rich. That shape doesn't exist anymore. What replaced it is an hourglass. Jobs grew at the top in high-skill cognitive roles like software engineering and finance. Jobs grew at the bottom in low-skill service work like food delivery and warehouse fulfillment. And the middle, the stable, routine, well-paying jobs that used to employ millions of people, they just evaporated, automated out, offshored, restructured into oblivion. Here's what makes this genuinely insidious. The economy grew, GDP went up, productivity went up, corporate profits went up. But median wages for full-time workers barely moved since the 1980s. Where household incomes did rise, it wasn't because people were getting paid more, it was because both parents started working full-time. Two incomes to maintain what one used to cover, that's not progress. That's running twice as fast to stay in the same place. Meanwhile, the top 1% captured a wildly disproportionate share of all that growth through financialization, equity-based compensation, tech superstar economics, and tax rates that would have made the 1950s blush. And those rising top incomes didn't stay in a vacuum. They bid up prices in housing, education, and services, making middle-class life more expensive, even when middle incomes technically grew. Your salary goes up 2%, your rent goes up 8%. Cool. But here's what really killed the old middle class promise. It used to mean predictability. You knew what next year looked like. Now, gig work, temp contracts, irregular income, no benefits. Middle-income households often have their entire net worth locked in a house they're still paying off with limited emergency savings and heavy leverage through student loans and credit cards. One bad quarter away from crisis. That's not middle class. That's a tightrope with no net, and the thing is, the tightrope gets thinner every year, especially when housing enters the picture. The housing wall. Here's a number that should make you uncomfortable. In the mid-20th century, a typical house cost about 2 to 3 times the median household income. Today, that ratio has shifted to 5 times or more. In coastal US metros and London, we're talking double digits. That single shift is arguably the most devastating number in this entire story, because housing wasn't just where the middle class lived, it was how the middle class built wealth, and the latter got pulled up. Homeownership in the US rose from about 45% in the 1940s to 65% by the early 2000s. That was the system working as intended. But ownership rates among younger adults have declined markedly compared to earlier generations at the same age. The mechanism that built your parents' net worth is now financially unreachable for millions unless, and here's the dark part, their parents help them with deposits. Access to home ownership increasingly depends on family wealth, which means intergenerational inequality just compounds forever. So why don't we just build more houses? Because the people who already own them won't let us. Restrictive zoning, lengthy permitting, and local opposition to density constrains supply, so that increased demand doesn't produce more housing. It just produces higher prices. Meanwhile, financialization treats housing as an asset class. Investor purchases and securitization disconnect prices from local wages entirely. Housing stops being shelter and starts being a stock that people live inside. The result is that many middle-income households in expensive cities spend 40% or more of their income on housing. That leaves almost nothing for savings. The thing that was supposed to make you wealthy is now the thing keeping you broke. But here's what makes it politically unfixable. Existing homeowners resist supply expansion because more housing might reduce their property values. The middle class is now fractured along owner-renter lines, with one half fighting to preserve scarcity that the other half is drowning in. Same class, opposing interests. But if housing is the wall blocking entry into the middle class, wait until you see the trap door waiting just beneath it. The benefits cliff. Here's something that will make your blood boil. The system that's supposed to help people climb out of poverty is architecturally designed to punish them for climbing. It works like this. A single mother earning just below a certain threshold gets housing assistance, food support, childcare subsidies, and Medicaid. She gets offered a promotion worth an extra few $1,000s a year. She takes it, and then she loses her housing subsidy. Her food assistance drops, her childcare costs triple, and she's suddenly staring down the barrel of private health insurance premiums she cannot afford. Her net income after that promotion, lower than before she got it. This isn't an edge case. Effective marginal tax rates for low-income households receiving means-tested benefits regularly hit 60 to 80%. In some configurations, they exceed 100%. Let me say that again. The government has created a system where earning more money makes you poorer. That's not a safety net, that's a cage. Healthcare is where it gets genuinely cruel. Losing Medicaid eligibility doesn't just mean paying premiums, it means exposure to catastrophic costs. One hospital visit, one chronic condition flaring up, and you're buried. Medical debt remains one of the most common contributors to personal bankruptcy. So workers do what any rational person would do. They refuse promotions, they limit their hours, they stay exactly where they are, because the alternative is financial ruin disguised as upward mobility. Childcare is the same story. Subsidies phase out as income rises, and suddenly every extra dollar earned goes directly to daycare costs. You're working more hours to net the same amount, which is, not ideal. Stack all of these together, housing, healthcare, childcare, tax brackets, and what you get is a corridor between poverty-level benefits and genuine middle-class stability that is narrow, punishing, and designed by people who apparently never modeled what happens when you layer 6 phase-outs on top of each other. The system doesn't help people cross the gap. It makes the gap radioactive, but if you think benefits cliffs are the last obstacle, wait until you see what's left of the middle class for the people who actually made it through. What remains? So who's actually still in this thing? Because the middle class that exists today looks nothing like the one your grandparents knew. It's older, more educated, more likely to have 2 incomes, and concentrated in cities where the jobs actually are. The single earner factory worker supporting a family of 4, that's folklore now. Today's version requires a degree, a working spouse, and a location within commuting distance of a metro area with a functional knowledge economy. Here's the thing, higher education has become the unofficial entry ticket. You basically need a degree to get through the door. But having one doesn't guarantee you make it inside. Plenty of degree holders are drowning in student debt while earning salaries that technically qualify as middle income but feel like anything but. The credential gets you to the starting line. It doesn't get you across it. The jobs themselves have migrated entirely. Manufacturing used to be the backbone. Now it's healthcare, education, public administration, IT, finance, and professional services. These are fine industries. But they require qualifications, they're geographically clustered, and many of them depend on institutional stability that's never guaranteed. One round of austerity, one budget cut, one reorganization, and your stable career evaporates. And the financial picture underneath is genuinely grim. A substantial share of households earning middle-class incomes cannot cover a moderate, unexpected expense without borrowing or selling something. Their retirement plans have shifted from defined benefit pensions, where the company bore the risk, to defined contribution accounts, where you bear it, hope you didn't retire in 2008. Then there's the geographic split. Two entirely different species both get called middle class. In thriving metros, you've got younger, dual-earner professionals paying obscene rent but accessing real career growth. In former industrial towns, you've got older homeowners sitting on depreciated property, dependent on legacy pensions and whatever's left of the local economy. Same label. Completely different realities. But maybe the most revealing detail is this. Even the people who statistically are middle class don't feel like it. They feel one job loss, one health crisis, one divorce away from the whole thing collapsing. And honestly, they're not wrong. Being middle class in 2024 often means being educated, dual income, asset poor, and quietly terrified. But if the problem is this obvious and this widespread, you'd think someone would do something about it, which brings us to why nobody does. Why nobody fixes it. Here's the question that should bother you more than any statistic in this video. If every single politician claims to care about the middle class, why does absolutely nothing change? The answer is brutal, and it's threefold. First, the middle class isn't one group anymore. It's a collection of people who actively disagree with each other. An upper-middle professional in Austin and a factory worker in rural Ohio are both technically middle class, but they want completely opposite things from their government. One benefits from globalization, the other got destroyed by it. You can't build a political movement out of people pulling in different directions, and nobody has figured out how to bridge that gap. So instead, politicians pick a slice, market to them, and ignore the rest. Second, the decline benefits too many powerful people. Financial institutions make money off mortgage lending and debt products. Corporations benefit from weak unions and cheap global labor. Wealthy homeowners benefit from rising property values and fight against any development that might bring those values down. Every single structural reform that would actually help, whether that's housing supply expansion, tax overhaul, or labor protections, threatens someone with enough money to hire lobbyists. And those lobbyists win. Exposed steelworkers don't have lobbyists. Third, the collapse is too slow to trigger action. There's no single catastrophic moment, no one day where the middle class disappears and forces a response. It's a leak, not a flood. And the people getting hurt the most, younger workers in precarious jobs, displaced industrial workers, they're the least politically organized groups in the country. They vote less, they donate less, they have less time to attend town halls because they're working 2 jobs. Meanwhile, cultural and identity conflicts absorb whatever economic anger does exist and redirect it toward issues that don't challenge anyone's bottom line. You stay mad about things that don't cost billionaires a cent. So the middle class sits in this paradox, the most invoked group in political history, endlessly name-dropped in speeches and campaign ads, and yet peripheral to every actual policy decision that matters. Talked about constantly, served almost never. Not all stories have a point. Sometimes they're just slow and uncomfortable from beginning to end. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.